speech. Imagine this. You take a step back from someone for 30 days. It may sound like a strange approach, especially when your feelings are intense, but sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones where you simply stop chasing. In relationships, we often think that by constantly being there, always texting, always calling, always showing up, we're securing our connection. But the truth is, sometimes presence alone isn't what creates desire. It's the absence. Taking time for yourself isn't about manipulation. It's about reclaiming your energy, your worth, and your power. In those 30 days, you're not only giving him the space to reflect on what he might be losing, but you're also giving yourself the chance to refocus on who you are outside of that relationship. You're showing both of you that your world doesn't revolve around any one person, and that makes you infinitely more attractive. Because here's the thing, people often don't value what's always available. We naturally chase after the things we think we might lose, or the things that offer us a sense of mystery and challenge. So when you step away, he's forced to face what it feels like when you're no longer there. The silence speaks louder than 1,000 conversations. When you're constantly around someone, they get used to your presence. It's like a song you hear over and over again. It starts to blend into the background and the impact fades. The same thing happens in relationships. When you're always there, available at a moment's notice, it becomes easy for the other person to take you for granted. They stop seeing the effort you put in, the energy you give, or the value you bring, because it becomes expected. It's simply a given. But the moment you step back, something powerful happens. In your absence, they are forced to reflect on what you brought to the relationship. They begin to notice the little things that used to be part of their day, but are now missing. They start to realize that your presence wasn't something to take lightly. It was a privilege. When you're no longer there to give attention, affection, or time, they start to feel the gap. And in that gap, desire begins to grow. It's human nature to desire what we can't easily have. When something becomes scarce, it suddenly seems more valuable. The same psychology applies in relationships. When you disappear for a time, it creates a sense of longing, a sense of wanting to reconnect. The familiarity of having you around is replaced by a feeling of uncertainty. And it's in that uncertainty that desire takes root. They begin to think about you more, wonder what you're doing, and question why they aren't hearing from you. That curiosity can fuel attraction in a way that constant availability never could. But this isn't about playing games. It's about understanding that absence allows for reflection. It gives both of you the chance to assess what's important and where you stand. By stepping back, you give them the space to appreciate what they might lose. The absence doesn't just create desire, it creates perspective, and that perspective can lead to a stronger connection when and if they choose to return. When you take time for yourself, something profound begins to happen. You start to rediscover who you are outside of the relationship. In the day-to-day of being with someone, it's easy to lose sight of your own identity. You can get caught up in meeting their needs, their schedule, their emotions, and slowly you forget about your own desires and goals. It becomes all too easy to let the relationship define you and shape your decisions without even realizing it. But when you step back and take space, you get the chance to reconnect with the person you were before that relationship. You start to remember the things that made you happy, things you may have pushed aside or forgotten in the rush of trying to maintain the connection with someone else. This is your time to refocus on what brings you joy, on what makes you feel alive. And fulfilled. It could be pursuing a passion that's been on the back burner for months or even years, diving into hobbies that make you feel creative, or simply spending time in quiet reflection, learning about yourself again. As you do this, you'll find that your sense of self begins to strengthen. You start to feel more confident in your own skin without needing validation from anyone else. Instead of looking to someone else for approval or affection, you begin to build a relationship with yourself. And that's where the real power lies. When you feel strong on your own, you radiate a different kind of energy. You become someone who doesn't need anyone else to complete them, and that self-sufficiency is incredibly attractive. This period of self-rediscovery is also about redefining your standards and boundaries. When you take time to reflect, you realize what you truly want and what you deserve in a relationship. You get to reevaluate how you want to be treated and how you will allow others to be part of your life. You start to understand that your happiness isn't dependent on another person being there. It's something you create for yourself. And as you grow and rediscover your own strength, your entire outlook changes. You stop feeling anxious about whether or not someone is going to return or stay in your life, because you're focused on the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. Whether or not they come back becomes less of a concern because you've found your own value and happiness independently. When you focus on yourself and your growth, something incredible happens without you even trying. You start to attract people naturally. When you're constantly chasing someone or seeking their approval, it can feel forced and heavy. It puts you in a position where you're giving all your energy to get something back. But when you shift your focus inward, when you work on yourself and your own happiness, you begin to radiate an effortless confidence that draws people in without you having to do anything at all. People are naturally drawn to confidence, to those who are sure of themselves and who don't rely on others to feel whole. It's magnetic because it shows that you value yourself. It shows that you're secure and that your happiness isn't dependent on someone else giving it to you. When you walk into a room with that kind of energy, people notice. They can sense that you're not desperate for attention or validation. Instead, you're content in your own skin, and that makes them want to be around you. Natural attraction comes from being centered, from knowing who you are and what you stand for. It comes from the way you carry yourself, the way you handle situations with grace and calm. It's in the way you speak and the way you make decisions with clarity and confidence. When you're not constantly seeking external approval, you give off a different kind of energy. It's light, it's free, and it's genuine. And people are much more likely to be drawn to that than someone who's constantly trying to prove their worth. This type of attraction isn't something you can fake or force. It comes from within. It's a reflection of the work you've done on yourself, the care you've given to your own personal growth, and the understanding you have of your own value. When you're content with yourself and your life, it shows in everything you do. You stop worrying about whether or not someone likes you because you already like yourself. You stop trying to win people over because you know the right people will naturally gravitate towards you. When you create a challenge in a relationship, it sparks a different kind of engagement. Human nature is wired to be curious and drawn to what isn't easily obtained. If something or someone is always available and predictable, it can lose its appeal. People tend to engage more deeply when they feel there's something to work for or something just beyond their immediate grasp. When you step back and create some distance, you introduce an element of challenge into the dynamic. It's not about playing hard to get, but rather about showing that you're not always readily available for anyone at any time. It sends a message that you value yourself and your time, and that others need to meet that value with effort. the person on the other side starts to recognize that they need to step up to meet you halfway instead of expecting you to always be there without question. This challenge doesn't only create more engagement from the other person, but also from yourself. You begin to raise your own standards. You start to see what you truly want in a relationship and that you deserve someone who puts in the effort. It's a two-way process. When you create this challenge, you're inviting the other person to engage more fully, but you're also making sure that you don't settle for less than your worth. At the same time, this challenge doesn't push people away, but instead makes the connection more exciting. When things are too easy or predictable, they lose their spark. There's something about uncertainty and the idea of not knowing exactly how someone feels. That creates a sense of excitement. When someone is challenged to win your attention or your time, they're much more likely to invest their energy into the relationship by creating space and showing that you have your own life, your own goals, and your own independence. You make the relationship more engaging. The other person begins to realize that they can't just sit back and expect everything to come to them. They start to invest more. They start to think about what they need to do to be part of your life, and that effort makes the relationship stronger. This doesn't mean creating unnecessary drama or games. It's about setting healthy boundaries and showing that you're someone who values herself enough to expect the same value in return. It's about creating a balance where both people are contributing and where there's mutual respect and engagement. When you introduce a challenge, you make it clear that your attention and time are valuable and that they're worth working for. In the process, both of you become more engaged. The relationship becomes more dynamic and interesting because there's a sense of growth and effort instead of stagnation. By stepping back and allowing space for the other person to put in the effort, you create a relationship where both of you are fully invested, and that investment creates a deeper, more meaningful connection. When you take a step back in a relationship, you shift the power dynamic without even saying a word. In any relationship, power can sometimes become imbalanced, often without either person realizing it. When one person is always available, always giving, and always chasing, they begin to hand over their power to the other person. It creates a dynamic where one side is putting in all the effort and the other is receiving without having to give much in return. By stepping back, you take control of your own energy and your own value. You stop overgiving and you show that you won't always be there no matter what. You're no longer the one chasing or trying to keep the connection alive alone. Instead, you're letting the other person come to you. You're creating a balance where both people have to put in effort if they want to keep the connection alive and healthy. This shifts the power dynamic from one-sided to mutual. When you take a step back, the other person is forced to consider their role in the relationship. They begin to realize that if they want to keep you in their life, they have to step up and contribute. They can no longer coast along expecting you to always make things work. The balance begins to shift and they start to engage more actively in maintaining the connection. The power is no longer entirely in their hands because you've reclaimed your own space and value.